The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that pressed against your chest and made breathing feel heavy. She stood there young, confident, a flicker of nerves hiding behind her bright eyes. "I speak 9 languages," she said, her voice steady but carrying a weight no one expected. A judge, older, graying, with a history written into the wrinkles on his forehead, leaned back in his chair and chuckled. Not mockingly, or maybe he thought it was harmless, but the laugh bounced off the wood-paneled walls, sharp and dismissive. He didn't see her. He didn't know the storm behind those words. She smiled faintly, unshaken. 9 languages. Fluent, conversational. I can read, write, and understand cultures through words you've barely heard of. Her voice didn't tremble, but inside, her heart hammered. Every syllable carried years of struggle, of proving herself in classrooms where she was told she wouldn't fit, in streets where she had to fight to be seen, in homes where she was underestimated. The laughter faded slowly as he studied her, a flicker of doubt crossing his eyes. He thought this would be simple, a formality, an easy day in court, but something in the precision of her words, the fire in her posture, made him pause. "What languages?" he asked finally, curiosity mixing with skepticism. "French, Spanish, Mandarin, Arabic, Swahili, Russian, German, Japanese, and Italian." Each word fell with clarity, like drops of water breaking a surface. The courtroom shifted. Whispers moved like currents, catching on the name of each language. Some sounded familiar, others exotic, but all carried weight. The judge's eyebrows raised. He leaned forward, folding his hands on the bench. "And why should this matter here?" "Because understanding is power," she said. "Not just the words, but the people. Every language is a bridge, every culture a story, and I have learned to cross them all." Her gaze swept the room, stopping briefly on faces that had doubted her, laughed at her, or simply looked away. A pause, heavy, intentional. The courtroom held its breath. Then the first twist came, a witness who had underestimated her. A man whose arrogance matched the judge's initial smirk opened his mouth to speak, only to stumble as her words, precise and layered, dismantled every assumption he had. Conversation after conversation, she translated, interpreted, explained nuances that left even seasoned professionals struggling to keep pace. By the end of the day, the laughter was gone, replaced by stunned silence, the kind that recognizes power, intellect, and sheer courage. The judge, who had chuckled first, now looked on, unblinking, speechless. And she? She walked out, not triumphant, but quietly victorious. The kind of victory that doesn't need applause because it carries its own weight. She had proven what many couldn't see at first glance, that intelligence, empathy, and courage can move mountains even in rooms where walls feel impenetrable. Outside the courthouse, the air felt sharper, colder somehow, as if the world itself had noticed the tension inside. She stepped down the stairs, each movement deliberate, measured, yet light with relief. Journalists, cameras, and smartphones hovered nearby, but she didn't falter. She had been here before, in hallways where people whispered, behind doors that held judgment, and under lights that exposed every doubt. A reporter rushed forward, voice trembling with urgency. "Miss Carter, can you tell us, did you expect the judge to react like that?" She paused, letting the question hang like a note suspended in a still room. Then she smiled softly, almost wistfully. "I didn't come here to impress anyone," she said. "I came to be understood, and I think today I was." The camera clicked. Flashbulbs flared. The world caught a glimpse of her calm resolve. But beyond the public eye, there was a deeper story, one no headline could capture. Back at her apartment, walls lined with books from every corner of the globe, she sank into her chair. Each book a reminder of battles fought, languages learned, and cultures embraced. She traced her fingers along the spines. French literature, Japanese poetry, Arabic philosophy, each a testament to years of dedication, sleepless nights, and a relentless desire to belong everywhere and nowhere at once. Her phone buzzed. A message from an old mentor. "They finally see it. Your voice carries weight. Don't let them forget it." She stared at the words and let out a slow breath. Wait, yes, but it was more than recognition. It was validation that struggle, discipline, and faith in one's own mind could pierce the armor of doubt. The next morning, the courtroom doors opened again, but this time she wasn't alone. Families of students, young interpreters, aspiring linguists, people who had followed her journey, had gathered outside, offering quiet nods of respect. Word of her feat had spread beyond the city. People began to realize that her command over languages was not a trick or a talent reserved for a few. It was a tool to connect, to heal, to challenge assumptions. Inside the courtroom, another hearing commenced. This time, she was called not as a defendant, but as an interpreter, bridging gaps between witnesses and officials. She shifted seamlessly between Mandarin, Arabic, and Swahili, guiding conversations with clarity, patience, and insight. The judge, the same man who had laughed days ago, watched her in awe. Not a word of sarcasm, only reverence. Every motion, every translation, every precise word shattered years of bias he hadn't known he carried. A moment came when a particularly contentious argument threatened to derail the proceedings. Tension crackled in the air. Voices rose, accusations flew, and she stepped in, softly at first, then firmly, weaving each language together, untangling confusion, soothing tempers, and revealing the truth beneath the chaos. By the end of the day, it was clear she wasn't just a linguist, she was a mediator, a peacemaker, a force capable of making the world listen. That evening, she walked alone through the streets, the city alive around her, neon lights reflecting in puddles from a recent rain. She thought about the boy who had once told her she would never fit in, the teachers who had doubted her, the doors that had closed before she could even knock. And she realized something profound. Success wasn't measured by applause or headlines. It was measured by the barriers she had broken, the minds she had opened, and the courage to speak when no one else would listen. Somewhere in the distance, the courthouse lights glimmered. She allowed herself a small smile. Today, she hadn't just spoken 9 languages, she had spoken truth, and the world had no choice but to hear. Weeks passed, and the city began to whisper her name. Not as a novelty, not as a curiosity, but as someone who could change the tone of a room simply by speaking. Yet she carried a quiet burden, invisible to the world. Nights were long, filled with memories she had tried to bury, the taunts, the isolation, the constant feeling of being less than in spaces meant for the privileged. Each language she had mastered was not just a skill, it was armor, a shield against doubt, a bridge to belonging. One evening, she received a call that would test everything she had built. A young girl, no older than 16, had been detained in a local hearing, unable to communicate her side because officials didn't speak her language. Panic threaded the girl's voice over the phone, and her mother's tears could be heard even through the static. Without hesitation, she agreed to help. Arriving at the courthouse, she found a room filled with confusion and frustration. Lawyers argued, translators faltered, and the girl sat quietly, small and trembling, lost in a storm of misunderstanding. She knelt beside her, speaking softly in her native tongue. The girl's eyes widened, relief flooding her face like sunlight breaking through clouds. As she interpreted, switching seamlessly between languages, the courtroom began to shift. What had been chaos transformed into clarity. Judges, lawyers, and officials listened, not just to words, but to meaning, to humanity. Each sentence she translated carried more than comprehension. It carried dignity, respect, and hope. And then the climax arrived. A moment that could have shattered everything. A powerful attorney, known for his arrogance, attempted to undermine her credibility, suggesting that no one person could truly master so many languages with authority. The room tensed, waiting for her to falter. She didn't. She rose, meeting his gaze steadily. 9 languages, she said, her voice calm but sharp. Not because I am better than anyone here, but because every language holds a story, and every story deserves to be heard accurately. She proceeded to recite passages, translate complex testimony, and mediate misunderstandings with such precision and empathy that even the attorney stopped mid-argument, realizing that his challenge had backfired. Whispers spread, eyes widened, and the judge, once doubtful, now leaned forward, watching in awe as the young woman dismantled assumptions and built bridges in real time. When the case concluded, the girl and her mother embraced, tears of relief and gratitude flowing freely. The courtroom had witnessed more than a legal proceeding. It had witnessed the power of language, courage, and unwavering dedication. Outside, the young woman walked through the city streets again. The neon lights glinted off wet pavement, reflections dancing like memories of every struggle she had endured. She thought of the judge, the attorney, the girl. All lives touched, all assumptions challenged. And she understood something fundamental. Mastery is not just about skill. It is about purpose. Every word she spoke carried meaning. Every connection she forged reminded the world that barriers could be broken. As she reached her apartment, days turned into weeks, and her story spread beyond the city. Invitations came from schools, community centers, even international conferences. She moved from courtroom to classroom, from lecture halls to online sessions, speaking in languages she had once thought of as walls between herself and the world. But now, each language became a bridge not just of words, but of empathy, understanding, and connection. Yet with recognition came a subtle loneliness. Every time she entered a room, people marveled at her skills, but few paused to see the person behind the words. Behind the 9 languages, there was a girl who had learned resilience the hard way, who had carried doubts like heavy stones in her pockets, and who longed for connection beyond admiration. One rainy evening, she returned to her favorite cafe, a quiet place where she could reflect without the glare of cameras or attention. Sitting by the window, she watched droplets race each other down the glass. A man approached, older, kind-faced, someone she had met years ago when she first began her journey with languages. He had been a mentor, a guide, the one who had insisted she was capable when no one else believed it. "You've changed the world today," he said softly, taking the seat across from her. "But remember, the world isn't just the places you touch. It's also the people you let in." She looked at him, the words sinking deep. For the first time, she realized that her journey wasn't just about speaking languages, interpreting meaning, or challenging assumptions. It was about finding spaces where she belonged, where voices weren't measured by fluency, but by authenticity. Her phone buzzed again, a message from the girl she had helped, now smiling in a photo with her mother. "You believed in me when no one did." "Thank you." Tears gathered, unbidden but welcome. And in that moment, she understood the true power of her words. They didn't just convey information. They conveyed hope, dignity, and courage. The next morning, she returned to the courtroom one last time, not as a participant, not as a translator, but as a witness to change. The judge who had once laughed now greeted her with quiet respect, nodding as she passed. The city had shifted in subtle ways, students inspired, communities reaching across divides, and a young generation realizing that knowledge, skill, and courage were not barriers, but keys. Inside the courtroom, she paused for a moment, letting the silence envelop her. This was more than victory. It was affirmation. Every late night studying Mandarin characters, every lonely hour practicing German grammar, every awkward conversation in a language she barely knew had led to this, a life where her voice mattered, not because of prestige, but because of impact. A final challenge came, a complex case involving multiple witnesses, all speaking different languages, all desperate to be understood, and she stepped forward, calm, confident, unwavering. Switching languages seamlessly, she guided conversations, untangled misunderstandings, and revealed truth with clarity. Every eye in the room followed her, every ear leaned closer. Even the skeptics watched in awe as she transformed chaos into clarity. By the day's end, the case was resolved not just legally, but morally. Misunderstandings had been mended, voices heard, and lives touched. And as she left the courthouse for the final time, she paused on the steps, looking out over the city. She thought of the judge who had once laughed, the girl she had helped, the countless students and strangers whose lives had been altered by her words. And she realized something profound. Mastery, courage, and compassion together could move mountains, bridge divides, and rewrite stories that others thought were fixed. She smiled quietly to herself. Speaking 9 languages had given her power, but using them with purpose had given her a legacy. And in that moment, she didn't just feel seen, she felt unstoppable. The world had listened. The world had understood, and she had changed it, one word at a time.